There are so many suburbs of Georgia that have been rated top place to live or top place to raise a family over the last couple of years. I was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, so I feel like I have a really unique perspective. I know the pros and cons of the different cities and the best places to eat or grab coffee. But after helping hundreds of families move here from across the US and even overseas, I was really surprised by some of the things that my clients told me they thought about Georgia, and I feel like it's really important that you know if you're thinking about making a move here. I'm Ashley Lazarian, a Georgia native and local real estate agent, helping people buy and sell in the suburbs of Georgia. So if you're looking to make a move, you can reach out to me at the email below. But first, let's talk about those things that you need to know. For the most part, homes in Georgia are going to be primarily in neighborhoods. Most of the neighborhoods are going to have an HOA, which can include a swimming pool, tennis courts. Many times there's a playground. There are quite a few communities as well that are golf communities, which means they're going to have a golf course right there within the neighborhood. Most of those golf courses are going to be open to the public as well. One thing I've heard from many clients, especially those clients coming from Florida, is there's not a lot of homes with their own pool. It's common in Florida for many homes to have their own pool in the backyard. That's just not the case here in Georgia. We experience all four seasons very dramatically compared to Florida. And so from about May until about end of September, beginning of October is going to be your warmer, hotter seasons. And that's primarily when you're going to utilize that pool. So there's quite a few months of the year that you're going to have the pool covered or having to pay to have it heated. And a lot of people just don't want to deal with that here. The great thing about having the community pool is the HOA is taking care of that. And again, it will open about the same time, end of May, when it's starting to get warm. You have it all summer long. That's truly where a lot of people meet their neighbors and kids go to play. And then towards the end of summer, usually about September, late September, beginning of October is when they're going to close up that pool for the season. All of the communities that are within an HOA are going to have HOA fees. Now, those fees can definitely vary. Most of the time, you're going to see fees that are somewhere between $500 to $1,000 a year. Now, if you're in a condo or a townhome community, this could be a monthly fee compared to an annual fee. Usually you're going to find that somewhere in the range of $200 to $250 a month. But that usually is going to include all of the maintenance on the exterior. Obviously that can vary per neighborhood. So if that's something that's important to you, let's make sure that we're looking at that as we're looking at homes. Many times in the golf communities, like we just talked about, the golf dues are completely separate from your HOA dues. So if golf is something that you know you're going to be wanting to do, make sure you're getting a quote on what the golf fees are on top of the HOA fees. Keep in mind in an HOA, there are going to be set rules. So you're not going to be having chickens running around. You're not going to be working on your car in the front yard. You cannot paint your house purple or polka dots. But the great thing is, neither can your neighbor. Ultimately, HOAs are there to maintain the community, which in turn helps your home value. They're keeping up the front entrance, they're maintaining the pool, they're keeping up the tennis courts and the playground, the lights, the streets. That being said, I know a lot of people have the mentality of, I'm not having an HOA tell me what I can do with my property that I'm paying for. So if that's you, or maybe you have an RV or a boat, maybe you really do want some of those chickens to have some eggs, perhaps having your own plot of land is a better option. There are still a lot of opportunities to purchase the land as well. You're going to find more land opportunities and more affordable opportunities for land a little bit further out of the suburbs. Within the suburbs, the cost of land has gotten so expensive that that's why you're seeing builders building homes tighter and tighter next to one another. Depending on how much acreage you're really looking for will also dictate where you're able to find that land. The next thing is the style of home. So Georgia experienced a huge boom right after the '96 Olympics. So a lot of homes were built here between '97 and 2007. These homes are what we consider traditional homes. You walk in, there's a staircase there, you've got an office or formal living room to one side and a dining room to the other. Now, a lot of these homes have been updated and renovated. However, they still have the traditional floor plan overall. Maybe some walls have been knocked down, but you're not going to find a lot of super modern homes here unless you go further into the city, or maybe some of those, like we said, that are individually built on plots of land. You have to understand the way kind of Atlanta and the suburbs were built. So close to Atlanta, or in some of the micro cities that we've talked about, like Monroe, Cumming, Woodstock, you're gonna find true Southern homes. And a lot of these homes were built in the early 1900s to the 1920s. As Atlanta grew and more people moved here, we got out to what was considered the suburbs, which is gonna be more like Chamblee inside the perimeter. And a lot of those homes were built in the 70s and 80s. That's where you're gonna see some of those mid-century modern vibes and some of the split level plans. Then as you go out even further, which is what we now consider to be the suburbs, Suwanee, Buford, Duluth, that's where you're gonna see a lot of the homes that were built in the 90s and 2000s. Something you'll notice as you start to look at homes here in Georgia is a lot of the homes have basements. After all, we're at the bottom of the Blue Ridge Mountains, and so on the top half of the state, you're pretty much looking at rolling hills as part of the terrain. So it just makes sense to build in those basements to the side of those rolling hills. I've had clients, as we're talking, say they don't want a basement at all. They're dead set that they don't want this dark, dingy space. I'm not gonna say that you're not gonna find a dark and dingy basements, but here in Georgia, we utilize basements a lot. Most basements here are gonna be what we call daylight basements. So when they're built into the side of the hill, you're gonna have an area that either has windows, or a lot of them are built so that you can walk straight out into the backyard. They're not all feeling like these underground bunkers. Basements here are where you find the extra hangout spots. You've got extra storage. Sometimes you have almost a whole second house. A lot of times as I've been touring basements with clients, when they're actually physically here looking at them, they walk down and they see a dehumidifier and absolutely panic, thinking, dear God, where is the mold and what is wrong with this basement? If you haven't heard, Georgia is humid, and especially during those summer months when it is so hot, it is extremely humid here. Sometimes the temperatures can be 80 degrees, but it feels like we're in the 90s just because of the humidity. And humidity transfers to moisture. And with these basements being built into the side of the hills, a lot of times these basements could have additional moisture, especially if the basements are left unfinished and they're not being heated and cooled all the time. So if you see a dehumidifier, please don't panic. The majority of homes here in Georgia, you're gonna find a combination of carpet and hardwood. Now, I will say over the last few years, we have seen less hardwood and seen more LVP. Even in some of the luxury homes, we're seeing LVP more and more compared to hardwoods. I definitely think it has to do with cost. It also has to do with durability. If you leave water on hardwoods, it buckles and stains, and then you have to refinish everything. And a lot of times people just don't want to deal with it. But I have noticed that as I'm walking through, some people will ask, where's the tile? Well, that's just not a popular option here. We definitely have it in our bathrooms, but so many people think you should have to have it in the kitchen, and you're not gonna find that many times here in Georgia. We put hardwood everywhere, and if it's not hardwood, it's definitely LVP. One of the things that absolutely surprised me, because I just have never even thought about this, is AC. Every home you walk in here is going to have air conditioning. I can genuinely say that over the last couple of decades that I've been working as a realtor, I've never walked into a home here that didn't have AC. I realized that a lot of my clients that are from up north, some of them even from California, they don't have air conditionings in their home. They wait until the weather is great, and then they have fans, or they have the windows open blowing in. And so that's just not something you're gonna see here. We have pollen season, we have mosquitoes. People don't really open their windows and let in the fresh air, so to speak, as much as you would think that they do here, even though we do have really great weather a lot of the time. During the summer, I can say that my family runs our AC constantly. So during the summer, our bill definitely goes up, but then in the winter time, it kind of offsets that cost. So realistically, I'm looking at about $130 a month across the annual bill. talking about the weather, I have a lot of people that will ask, well, what about a flood zone? Am I in a flood zone? I know some people that are coming from Louisiana or Florida definitely are thinking about flood zones, hurricanes, things like that. It's just not something that is very common here. Where this differs is if you live close to the coast on St. Simons or Savannah, you could definitely have homes in a flood zone. However, as you move inland, going towards the suburbs, you're just not gonna find that as often. Every once in a while, if you have a home that backs up to the river, it could potentially be in a flood zone. But most of the time, those homes are gonna be built on a much higher elevation. Tornadoes are something that you're going to hear about in Georgia. We don't get earthquakes or hurricanes. I hear horror stories from some of my clients that have lived through that, and they say, I just can't live through another one. In my 40 years of living here, I have only experienced one tornado. It was when I was in high school. We had some trees down, no electricity for a couple of days, but thankfully no one was hurt. It's definitely nothing compared to the hurricanes that you see in Florida or tornadoes that you see in the Midwest. The most important piece of this is going to be your perception. You are going to find that Southern hospitality is a real thing. I was with a client recently that's relocating from Los Angeles, and as we pulled up to this house, the neighbor next door came over, introduced himself, we introduced ourselves, he introduced his dog and said that he can't wait for my client to be his new neighbor. As we went inside the home, I laughed because my client said, people keep doing that to me. They just come up to me and start talking to me or smile at me as I'm walking down the street. Well, yeah, it's Southern hospitality. I guess honestly, living here for the last 40 years, I just take it for granted. If you can deal with random strangers smiling at you on the street and the hum of your dehumidifier, I think you will make it just fine here in Georgia. I hope this video helped. Click on any of my videos to watch more about the suburbs of Georgia. You can reach out to me directly, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next week.